Today I looked at 3 tiny bodies shivering from the cold, and I knew if I didn't act, they wouldn't see tomorrow. Yesterday, late afternoon, I saw her for the first time. I was chopping some leftover wood near my back porch. My hands were numb from holding the axe too long, but it felt better than sitting alone in the silent house. I remember I glanced up, wiping sweat off my brow, and there she was. A lynx, thin as shadows at dawn, her fur patchy, ribs pressed against her skin like someone had carved her out of bones and fear. Her eyes locked on mine, golden, alert, ready to run. I didn't move. She didn't either. I whispered under my breath. Not sure why. Maybe it was the way her shoulders trembled. Maybe it was those eyes. I dropped the axe slowly and stepped back into the kitchen. My fridge was nearly empty except for half a roasted chicken from the day before. I grabbed it with shaking hands. My brother used to laugh at me for cooking too much meat for one person. I walked out and placed the pieces at the edge of the porch. She didn't move at first. She kept staring at me, measuring my soul, I guess. Then she stepped forward, her paws silent, her movements broken but elegant at the same time. She sniffed the chicken, snatched it, and ran back into the trees. I stood there until my legs felt weak, thinking about Liam, my little brother. His laugh when we camped in Glacier National Park. The way he once screamed when a squirrel jumped on our tent at night. That was 3 years ago. The year cancer took him before his 20th birthday. I barely slept that night. Kept wondering where she was. Wondering if she survived the darkness. The wind rattled the windows, and the pine trees whispered things I didn't want to hear. Things about loneliness. About endings. Morning came gray and cold. I made coffee, staring out the window at the forest edge. No lynx. No movement. Just the smell of old pine needles and wet soil drifting in through the cracked window. Around noon, I heard a sound near the porch. A scraping, dragging sound. I stood up so fast the coffee spilled on my jeans. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my chest. She was back, but she wasn't alone. Beside her, pressed close to her trembling legs, were 3 tiny lynx cubs. Their fur was matted with dirt. One of them kept stumbling, its back legs weak. Another mewed softly, so quietly I almost missed it over the wind. I couldn't move. I felt my heart hammering so hard it hurt. She looked at me, her eyes calmer today, as if she knew I wouldn't harm them. She nudged the weakest cub forward. It fell on its side, breathing heavy, chest rising and falling like a bird trapped in a storm. I didn't know what to do. I felt heat rise up my neck, my pulse banging in my temples. They needed food. They needed warmth. And I was just a man standing barefoot on cold wooden planks, trying to understand why life had brought this to my door. I turned and went back inside. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the kettle. I boiled water, poured it into an old thermos, wrapped it in a towel, and carried it back out. The cubs didn't move. She watched me, ears flat, tail twitching, but she didn't run. I placed the warm bundle near them. The smallest cub pressed against it immediately, tiny paws curling around the towel. I went back inside, rummaged through the pantry, and found 2 cans of tuna. Not ideal, but better than nothing. I opened them both, mixing in some warm water. My hands reeked of fish as I placed the bowl near the porch steps. She sniffed it, tasted it, then stepped aside. The cubs, one by one, dragged themselves closer, lapping up the soupy tuna, their bodies shaking with every swallow. I leaned against the doorway, feeling tears sting my eyes. Liam would have known what to do. He always did. He'd tell me to build them a shelter, to keep watch for coyotes. He'd tell me not to think so much, just act. When the cubs finished, the smallest one collapsed onto its side. Its breathing was shallow, eyes half closed. The lynx mother licked its head, making a soft chuffing sound. She looked at me again, her golden eyes filled with something that wasn't fear anymore. It was trust. And I knew then that this wasn't just about feeding a starving lynx anymore. This was about saving her family. And maybe, in some way I didn't yet understand, saving myself too. I stood there as the wind picked up, rattling the pine needles like quiet applause. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel completely alone. The morning air felt like ice on my skin. I stood by the porch watching the cubs huddled against their mother, the smallest one still barely breathing. I knew they wouldn't make it through another cold night like this. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped wire around my ribs. I went back inside, rummaging through the hall closet until I found an old moving blanket. It smelled like dust and oil. I carried it outside to the old shed near the tree line. The shed hadn't been used in years. The door creaked so loudly the lynx flinched and bared her teeth, her ears flattening back. "It's okay, girl," I whispered. "I'm just trying to help." Inside, the floor was covered in dry pine needles blown in by the wind. I swept them aside with my boot and spread the blanket over the cold concrete. There was a broken workbench near the back wall, its wood splintered and warped. I leaned it sideways to form a makeshift barrier against the wind. By the time I finished, my hands were raw and my breath came out in white bursts. I went back to the porch and crouched down. The mother lynx watched me with wary eyes, her cubs clinging to her fur. "Come on," I said softly. "It's warmer in there." She didn't move, just stared. I sighed and went back inside. As I made coffee, I thought about Liam. When we were kids, we'd spend hours in the woods behind our house in Montana, pretending to be wildlife rescuers. Liam would tape cardboard to his arms like protective guards and crawl under bushes to rescue baby birds or rabbits tangled in old netting. He always said animals deserved better than what people gave them. He wanted to be a vet. I wanted to be a photographer. Funny how neither of us ended up where we planned. My phone buzzed on the counter, snapping me back. An email from work. I didn't even open it. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts until I found Dr. Jensen, the vet who once helped me when I found an injured hawk 2 years ago. I pressed call. "Daniel?" His voice was warm but tired. "What's going on?" "Hey doc, sorry to bother you. I have a lynx here. She's starving. She brought her cubs. They're so weak. One can barely move." Silence. Then a sigh. "Daniel, you know I can't legally treat wild predators without state approval. It's risky. She might attack if you try to help. And removing them from her could be worse. But if I don't do something, they'll die?" I know. But if you call wildlife control, they'll relocate her. Maybe even euthanize the cubs if they're too sick. I've seen it happen." My throat felt dry as ash. "So what do I do?" He paused. "Keep them fed. Keep them warm. That's all you can do right now. Let nature take its course." I ended the call with shaking hands. Outside, the mother lynx had moved closer to the shed. The cubs dragged themselves after her, their tiny bodies swaying. 1 hour later, while I stacked old towels and hay inside the shed to soften the ground, I heard a rustle behind me. I turned and froze. She was there, holding another cub in her jaws. This one was even smaller than the others. Its fur was soaked and clumped together. She set it down gently next to its siblings, then turned to me, her chest heaving. Her eyes were dull with exhaustion. I stepped back, giving her space. She licked each cub's face, nosing them closer together on the blanket. The smallest one didn't move. I could see its tiny ribs straining with each shallow breath. My vision blurred. I wiped my eyes hard, angry at myself for feeling so much. Angry that I couldn't just let nature handle it. Angry at this world for making something so innocent fight so hard to stay alive. I went inside to make more tuna soup. As I stirred the hot water into the can, my hands trembled so bad I spilled it onto the counter. I pressed my palms down on the cold granite and let out a shaking breath. "Come on, Liam. What would you do?" I could almost hear his voice. "Just do what you can, Danny. That's enough." When I went back out, the mother lynx lifted her head and sniffed the air. I set the food down near the shed door. She didn't touch it until I stepped away. Then she lapped at it slowly, her shoulders quivering with fatigue. I sat on the porch steps, arms wrapped around my knees, watching them as the sun dipped behind the pines. The cubs curled into each other, their breathing quiet but steady for now. And as darkness crept in, wrapping the forest in black silence, I felt something shift inside me. Something small and warm, like hope. But it came with fear too, because I knew hope could be ripped away in a single night. And I wasn't sure I could survive losing anything ever again. Night felt like a thick black curtain around my house. I kept the porch light on, its yellow glow spilling into the yard where the shed sat like a silent guard. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those tiny cubs, their bodies shivering, their breaths thin and ragged. Around midnight, I heard a sound, a scraping at the porch steps. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the door. When I flicked it on, the beam caught her eyes first, glowing gold in the darkness. She was standing at the bottom step, staring at me. Her ears twitched back, her chest heaving. I saw the cubs behind her, huddled together in the shadows. The smallest one wasn't moving. My heart dropped into my stomach. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold. My feet were bare on the wood, but I didn't care. I knelt down a few feet from them. "Hey, girl," I whispered. "It's okay. I'm here." She didn't run. She just kept staring at me with those deep, haunted eyes. I flicked the light down to the smallest cub. Its chest was barely rising. Its mouth opened in a tiny gasp for air, then closed again without a sound. "No, no, no," I breathed out. I crawled forward slowly, keeping my head down so she wouldn't feel threatened. My hands shook as I reached out. The cub's fur was damp and cold under my fingers. I could feel its ribs like twigs beneath its skin. I need to get it warm. Now. I looked up at her. Her ears flicked. Her tail twitched side to side, but she didn't move away. She let me slide my hands under the tiny body and lift it up. I cradled it against my chest, feeling its faint heartbeat against my skin. I backed up slowly, never taking my eyes off her. She took a step forward, then stopped. I think she knew I wasn't going to hurt her baby. Inside, I turned on every light in the kitchen. I laid the cub on a folded towel and grabbed the old thermos wrapped in a fresh warm towel from the dryer. I placed it beside the cub, hoping the heat would seep into its tiny body. "Come on, little guy, stay with me." I filled a small dropper with warm water and tuna juice, holding its head up gently. A few drops slid into its mouth, but most just dripped down its chin. Its eyes fluttered half open, cloudy and unfocused. "Don't die. Please don't die." My chest ached so hard I thought my ribs would snap. I rubbed its tiny front paws between my fingers, trying to stimulate blood flow. Its breathing was shallow, each inhale a ragged whisper. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, it let out a tiny squeak. I froze. Its mouth opened again, this time a little wider, and its paws twitched against my palm. "That's it. Come on, keep fighting." I heard a soft thud behind me. I turned my head slowly. She was at the kitchen door. Somehow, she had crept onto the porch and pressed her face against the glass, staring in at her cub. I didn't know what to do. My pulse pounded in my neck. She let out a sound, a low chuffing noise that rumbled through the glass. The cub's ears flicked weakly at the sound. I wanted to open the door and let her in. I wanted to give her back her baby. But what if she panicked inside the house? What if she attacked out of fear? So I just sat there on the floor, my back against the fridge, holding her baby in my hands while she watched from outside. Tears blurred my vision until the cub became a tiny fuzzy shape of life, and hope and fear all mixed into one. "Please, God, I don't ask you for much, but please, don't let this little one die tonight." The cub let out another tiny squeak, and its front paws curled slightly around my finger. Its breathing was still thin, but it was there. I leaned my head back against the fridge, closing my eyes for just a moment. Outside, the wind rattled the porch railing, and the pine trees whispered secrets to each other in the darkness. And in that moment, I felt Liam beside me again, his voice echoing in my mind. "You're doing good, Danny. Just keep going." I opened my eyes to the soft golden stare of the lynx at my door, and I knew I couldn't let them die. Not while I was still breathing. Not while I still had hands to help. Morning light crept through the kitchen window, pale and silent. I'd fallen asleep on the floor, my back against the fridge, the cub tucked into the crook of my arm. When I woke, its chest was rising and falling in small, steady breaths. I felt a relief so sharp it hurt. I glanced up and saw her through the glass door. She was still there, sitting like a statue, her eyes locked on her baby. When I stood, she didn't move. I opened the door slowly, stepping out onto the cold porch. "Here you go, girl," I whispered. I knelt down and placed the cub gently on the porch boards. She stepped forward immediately, sniffed its fur, and licked its tiny head over and over until it let out a weak squeak. Her ears flicked forward, and for the first time, I saw her tail give a small, quick twitch, almost like happiness. I went back inside, my chest tight with emotions I couldn't name. I poured myself coffee with shaking hands when I heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel. I turned to see a white truck pull up at the edge of my driveway. Green letters read Wildlife Rescue Unit. My stomach turned to stone. Two people got out, a man and a woman, both wearing heavy canvas jackets and badges clipped to their collars. The woman raised a hand in a cautious wave as they approached the porch. "Are you Daniel Harper?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "Yeah, what's this about?" "We got a call from a neighbor about a lynx and cubs on your property. May we take a look?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. They climbed onto the porch, the boards creaking under their boots. The man knelt down near the cubs, pulling out a small flashlight to check their eyes and gums. "They're severely dehydrated," he said, "and underweight." The mother lynx bared her teeth but didn't attack. She just stood between them and her cubs, her sides heaving with each breath. The woman sighed. "Look, Daniel, these animals can't survive like this. Their mother is sick. Probably mange, maybe worse. If we don't intervene, they'll die." My throat closed up. "What are you saying?" "We need to take them to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. She needs medical treatment, and the cubs will die without proper care." I shook my head. "Can't you treat her here? She trusts me. They're safer here than being caged." The man stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "That's not how it works. She's a wild animal. She won't survive without treatment. If we leave her here, her sickness will spread to the cubs, and they'll all die within days." I felt my chest heave with every breath. The lynx turned her eyes to me. They weren't angry, just tired, trusting, broken. "What will happen to them?" I asked. "If she responds to treatment, we'll release them back here in a few weeks. If not," the woman paused, "we do what we can, but at least they won't suffer." The silence was so thick it felt like drowning. I crouched down beside the lynx. Her ears flicked, but she didn't move away. I reached out slowly and let my fingers brush the rough fur between her ears. "I'm so sorry, girl," I whispered so only she could hear it. "I'm so sorry." She blinked, slow and calm, as if she already knew this was coming. The man brought out a long pole with a soft loop at the end. He moved carefully, speaking in low tones as he slipped it over her head. She tensed but didn't fight. Her cubs mewed softly as they were gathered into a thick, blanket-lined crate. When they carried them to the truck, she let out a low chuffing call. The cubs answered with tiny cries. My chest felt like it was splitting open from the inside. The woman turned back before climbing into the truck. "You did the right thing, Daniel. You probably saved their lives." I didn't answer. I just watched as the white truck rolled down the gravel drive, disappearing between the pine trees. I stood there until the cold sank into my bones. The porch was empty. The yard was silent. I went back inside, closed the door, and pressed my back against it. The house felt emptier than ever. But somewhere deep in my chest, under all the pain and the quiet, was the smallest flicker of relief. Because for the first time in a long time, I knew I had done something right. And that had to be enough. That just had to be enough. That night, the house felt too quiet. The ticking of the old kitchen clock sounded like hammer blows in the silence. I sat at the table with a mug of coffee gone cold hours ago, staring at the empty porch through the window. I kept expecting to see her golden eyes staring back at me from the darkness. But there was nothing, just shadows moving in the wind. When I finally went to bed, sleep didn't come easy. I tossed and turned, my sheets twisted around my legs, my chest aching with emptiness. Sometime after midnight, I drifted off. In my dream, I was back in Montana. Liam was there, sitting on a fallen pine log, his elbows resting on his knees, his hair ruffled by the mountain breeze. He was smiling at something in his hands. I walked closer and saw it was one of the lynx cubs, its small head tucked under his chin, purring softly. Liam looked up at me, his eyes crinkling the way they always did when he smiled. "See, Danny," he said, scratching behind the cub's ears. "They're gonna be okay." I wanted to say something, but my throat felt tight. I could only nod. Liam laughed, that same warm, bright laugh that used to echo off the canyon walls when we hiked together. "Just do what you can," he said. "That's all any of us can do." I woke up with tears drying on my cheeks. The early morning light was seeping in through the blinds, painting thin golden lines across the ceiling. I sat up slowly, my body aching from the restless night. The house was silent except for the creak of wood as it warmed in the sun. I pulled on a flannel shirt and walked barefoot into the kitchen. Outside, the yard looked the same as always. The shed stood quiet, the porch empty. Birds chirped in the pines, and a squirrel darted across the fence rail, its tail flicking with energy I couldn't feel. I made a cup of coffee and took it out onto the porch. The wood was cold under my feet. I sat on the top step, staring out at the tree line where I first saw her. There was no movement, no flash of golden fur between the pines, no tiny mewling cries drifting on the breeze. And yet, for the first time in so long I couldn't remember, I felt calm. Not happy, but calm, like something inside me had settled. I sipped my coffee slowly, feeling the steam warm my face. The silence wasn't heavy this morning. It felt clean, honest. I closed my eyes and thought about Liam. About the way he always saw hope where I only saw endings. About his words in my dream. Just do what you can. I breathed in the crisp morning air. Somewhere far away, I imagined her and her cubs in a warm enclosure, safe, cared for, fed. I imagined them growing stronger every day until one morning, someone would open a gate, and she would step out into the wild again, her cubs tumbling after her. And maybe she'd look back, just for a second, before disappearing into the trees. I finished my coffee and stood up, feeling the chill seep into my bones. The sun was rising higher now, lighting up the tops of the pines with gold. I turned and walked back into the house, closing the screen door behind me. The porch creaked as it settled. The wind rattled the branches outside. And in that quiet, empty house, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Because for once, I knew I had done something that mattered. Something good. And for me, that was enough.